Okay, in this video I want to talk a little bit about the satin stitch and satin columns. This is, in a way, this is the most complicated, or yeah, I would say almost for most people, the most complicated and hardest part on how to create satin stitches and how to create satin columns and what is all the difference, all those kind of things. So I just want to try to cover some of it. I don't know exactly how far I will get into everything, but I hope I can explain some of the issues you're having with creating satin stitches or creating satin columns. There is quite a difference in a way between the two of them, because with a satin stitch we do not go beyond the 11-12 millimeters, because a lot of the machines, they will not go and stitch out beyond that length unless you have specific settings on your machine. Then you can go and stitch a longer satin stitch. But once we go over the 12 millimeters, then we go and make changes to our satin columns in order to create a different stitch type. So there are many possibilities with the satin columns. For a satin stitch, when we have a satin stitch between the 5 and the 8 millimeters, then we are starting to consider already to go into a fill type of stitch. And that will depend a little bit on where it is going to be stitched on, where it is going to be used, if it is a high wear item or a low wear item or on a towel or anywhere. You have to be considerate of what is the best type of satin stitch to be used and at what length to use. So there is many options we always have to be considerate of. So let's go and dive into it a little bit on how to create satin stitches. Satin stitches are basically we have to create the satin columns. So how can we create satin columns? Well, there are multi aspects of creating a satin column. So I got here a bunch of things on my screen. These are all satin columns. Some things can be confusing. Here, this is just a stroke object, and you can see that is just a stroke, and it's got only 2 nodes, and we can go extension, ink stitch, tools, satin, stroke to satin, and this will create a satin column. And as you can see, there is 1 rung going across. So that is one way of creating a satin. So all you need to do is, with a Bezier tool, draw a line. Doesn't matter how complex you making that line. And then you go, and as you can see, mine shows here as a fill. I can just like that turn off the fill, and I'll give it a stroke, and I can set my stroke width, and I can convert this line into a satin column. Then I'll delete that one. We can also let me select the next object. We can also create a satin column by creating zigzag lines. So all we need to do is we grab the Bezier tool, and we can draw zigzag lines according to the shape we are working on, and we can start going around the curve also. That is no problem either. Just go around the curve and create your zigzag, and so that way you can follow the contour of a certain specific shape you're working on. And then we can go, and the stroke is still pretty wide here, doesn't really matter for this purpose. And then we can also go extension, ink stitch, tools, satin, zigzag line to satin, and we click on there, and then there are options here. Converts a zigzag line into a satin column, and we can go here. We can have a square or a sawtooth or a zigzag. I don't really see any haven't really noticed any difference between the sawtooth and the zigzag. Then you have a smoothing option, so that depends on the smoothing of the rail. You can apply that, and you can add rungs, but you can also do it without rungs. I'll get into that in a moment. So let's go and add the rungs, and we go and hit apply. And there you can see now Inkstitch has converted that zigzag line into a satin column. And if we go to the node select tool, we will see that the nodes, they are where the zigzags are, and you can see that the rungs and the nodes of the rails, they are all in the same location. So in an instance like this, you can easily work without any of the rungs. A rung is not needed, but it makes it quite a bit easier in some more complex situations on having the rungs. So that is an option to convert a zigzag into a satin. So I'll delete that one, and this one is the same thing. Here you see the sawtooth. So there too again, the same with the Bezier tool. You can just go and create your sawtooth by just clicking your points, and you can start going around the corner. So that takes a little bit of time to create also, but it depends on the shape and on the design you're working with, on what option you're using for converting to a satin column. And there too again, extension, ink stitch, tool, satin, zigzag line to satin, and then we go here to the square, and we go and hit apply. And we will see that the rungs are being created where the straight line goes across, and the other parts are the other side of the as you can see, this would have been the rung, and this outside edge that become the rails. So what we also have, it is really complicated stuff all, but I'm gonna delete that. So that is how you can convert something to a satin. Then the satin width. Okay, if you have, here you can see I got 4 lines going across. But Inkstitch can become confused because here they are all a kind of the same equal distance. So if I go and run on something like this, I have 2 rails and 2 rungs. And I will run this in Inkstitch, and I can go here in the params on that one. There you can see, does this make sense? Well, in some ways it doesn't seem to make sense. In some other ways it will make sense, because we see the stitch angles are completely different than what the shape appears to be. So, and why is that? Well, that is the only reason for it is Inkstitch is confused on which one is a rail and which one is a rung. So, how can we solve this issue? Well, we can go and add an extra rung. So we can hold down the shift key and go to our pen tool and create an extra rung, and then we go extension, Inkstitch, tool, Satin. Go back to the params again, and there you can see now Inkstitch identifies the rungs and the rails the way we like it. But if we want to have, so this one we can with Control Alt. Okay, so I'm in the node select right now, and then Control Alt, I can delete that one, and I can delete that one and that one. So for a satin stitch, all we need is 2 rails, because this one will identify exactly as in the previous one. But if we want to go and change stitch directions on one like this, because there is only 2, I should go and make this one a little bit longer, then it is easier to show. If I create an extra node here, so you can double click there, or let me see here. There are, and I'm double clicking there, adding another node, and I'm gonna add a node here, and I'm gonna add a node there. Now we will see that Inkstitch will change the stitch directions, so it will spread the stitches equally between the first 2 nodes here, and the same amount of stitches between the first and the second node over there. And then the distance from that node to that node, it will spread the stitches equally, and the same amount of stitches from this node to that node. So if I go and run now the params again, you will see that the stitch directions, they really angle, and that is because of the location of the nodes. So it depends on how you want to work with your satin columns. If you want to work without rungs, then you have to work with nodes, and then you want that your nodes are pairing up. So that can be really time consuming because you need to add nodes, delete nodes, and that can become, for some reason, something is not wanting to work for me right now, and I don't know. Control Alt, I thought that was okay. Control Alt, that is deleting nodes. So learn your shortcuts also. The Control Alt, just your Alt key will add a node. Why is it not? It's not behaving the way now it is, unless my Alt key is sticking. Anyway, the Control Alt your Shift key, your Control key, and your Alt key. That gives quite a few shortcuts in order to manipulate some of your. Okay, I should select this one and make that straight. Makes it easier to work with again. So when working with the nodes, your Shift and your Control key and your Alt key can all be important shortcuts to work with some of the nodes. You can also select them all and make them all straight segments again, or if you want to have them auto curved, then you can select all these nodes and you can auto curve them. So there's many, learn these tools. Each tool on the side here has got also extra tools on the top bar. Okay, now we go to the next one. And let's delete that one. So now I have here, you can see I have two rails and I have one rung. A rung can only cross each of the rails once. Doesn't have to be that long, as long as you are across, but the rails, they can cross each other. So what do we get on a Satin column like this? So then we go ink stitch params, and now you will see it will swing over and you get a complete different layout of your satin. So close there. So that is what you get. Your rails can cross each other, and your rungs, they have to cross each rail. And so that is fairly straightforward there. I'll delete this one. Now we'll select this one for a moment, and extension ink stitch params. So now with the same satin column, here there is all of a sudden, and you see something completely different. Well, what I did here is I created the satin column, but then I turned off the custom satin column setting, and I went to the stroke and running stitch along the path, and then applied the ripple stitch. Then with the ripple stitch, there are many options available also again. And what I did here is a line distance exponent. So this is a kind of like what you would use for a gradient. The same thing. With a gradient, you also have the, oh, what is the setting now? It doesn't want to come to me the right word for it. But anyway, here you can see the distance between the first and the next line is different than over on this end. So that is here the line distance exponent. If I bring that to 0, then minimum distance length, line count. So there are many options available. It is for some reason something is not switching. And that can be that it is an issue with the version. I am running a development version, so I will have to look into this version further, because everything should now be an equal distance. And let's try switch there, and I'll go again. Stitch tolerance, random stitch length jitter, number of lines, the pattern position, that should be a line count. And I do not have any of the other settings. So there is something with the params here, but is not activating. Like I say, that should be, I didn't change any there. So there are some issues. I'll look into this further. Depending on which version you are running, you might be okay. But like I say, I am running a development version, and there seem to be still some issues. Yeah, because it is not. Anyway, let's try there. 15. See if that changes. No, doesn't change. Okay. Well, I cannot give an answer on why it is doing right now, because it should not be doing what it is doing right now. So I'll just close out of this one, but at least you're aware that with a satin column you can go and convert it into a ripple stitch here. So I'll delete that one. Okay, now I want to show you, this can become a little bit complicated for you to understand, but here are 2 rungs and 2 rails. And if I run this one into the simulator or in the params, now you can see it is flipping and turning over and continues the satin stitch. It flips over. And the distance over here with the stitch length, that can be controlled with a rung. And I want to go and show you one thing here. So we have to watch where each line is located, and we have to figure out which ones are the rungs. So this one, as I had mentioned before, the rails, they can cross each other, but a rung can only cross each rail once. So as you can see, this line, it is crossing this line only once, and this line only once. So it is this line is then a rung. And the same with this one. It's crossing only one rail here and one rail over there. But as you can see, rungs are allowed to cross over onto rungs. So now I'm going to go into the node mode, and I'm changing this line segment. I move the node a little bit. So what is happening now? Now we're getting a complete different one, because we will see that this line, it's intersecting this one and that one. So that are then the rails. And this is a rung, and this is a rung. So what kind of design do we get now? Extension, ink stitch, paramps. As you can see, now we get a complete different stitch out, and it is only because of the placement of the rungs and the rails. So in that way, it can become really complex and confusing, but you just have to look at it and say, what is a rail and what is a rung? What is my rail doing? And what is my rung doing? Because, so now here too, I have created a little satin column. And we go to the extension, ink stitch, paramps. And as you can see, there we can create many different shapes, and it just folds over onto each other. And we can see in this intersection, the stitching is crossing over differently than over here. And that can be accomplished also with the placement of your rungs. And there you can see where these rungs are located, and the distance where these rungs are, and the distance from the rails. So there is a variable part what is always affecting the stitch direction. So we'll delete that one. Now I'll show you something else. Here to a certain point I have the same shape as the previous one, but now what I did is I created one rung, and I have this intersecting here with a rail, and I just curved it and intersected here with a rail, because the one rail goes here over top of the other one, and then here over top again. So I cannot go and make this a straight one. So if I go and select this line segment, oh, I should go and show you first how this shows in the simulator, and then I will go and make a little change. So extension, ink stitch, paramps. So now watch how the stitching is. As you can see, you get here a really strange looking stitch out, and that is only because of the intersecting of the rung. So I'll close out of here. Now I can go and I can move this node into a different location, and we should get a different kind of sew out on it. So we go back to the paramps again. And there you can see, now I get a nicer crossover of the stitches, and it continues stitching really nicely. But if I wanted to go and have that rung cross both rails. That would be impossible, because if I select this line segment and make it a straight line, and I want to make sure I'm crossing each of the rails, you can see I'm crossing over the same rail twice, and then Inkstitch is giving issues, or it will ignore that rung. So I do not get the full control as I wanted. And you can see now I'm getting a curve in here. So now I'm going again and bring that node and now it is crossing this rail and it's crossing the other rail. And now we go back to the Inkstitch params again. And there you will see you get a different corner build where I have that funny looking rail. Oh no, funny looking rung. It is so confusing on keeping the rungs and the rails always straight, but it is what it is. Okay, then we delete that one. Okay, now what I did here is I created a satin, so a line, and sometimes we have a sharp point, and I'll set that to a line width of 3 here, extension Inkstitch, tool satin, stroke to satin, and now there is a rung. I'm gonna go and in the node select, and I'm gonna delete that rung for a moment. So I use the Control Alt in order to delete that rung. And in certain instances, what can happen with a satin like this, that the stitch length on the narrow section is properly for a satin, but here in the point we end up with a really long satin, what is not advisable. So how can we accommodate in a satin so that we get a shorter stitch here? So even though it can have rungs here, that's no problem either. And I'll show you how you can add the rungs in that in a minute. But what can be done in a sharp point like that, we can make this a separate cap, or we can split the satin here. So in order to split a satin, then what we do is extension Inkstitch command, attach command to selected object, and then we look for the satin cut point, and we can go and apply. Then we will see that there is a scissor somewhere on the satin column. We can place I gotta be the selection button. We can place this scissor wherever we want to cut this satin. So let's say I want to cut the satin column over there. So I place it, and the center point of the marker, That becomes the cut point. So then we select the satin column and we will go extension, ink stitch, tool satin, cut satin column, and now we can see, and I'll change the color for a moment. Now ink stitch has cut the satin column. It did not cut it as nice as I would have liked, and that probably the reason why this happened like this is because there were no rungs applied to the satin column. And the way it looks like, it made it a really funny looking one. So you always have to be cautious on what is happening, because it created here extra nodes on the end what are not wanted, or it probably was a rung what it created here on the end. I did not double check that, but anyway, so now we have two separate satin columns, so we can create two separate columns in order to get our point. We can also go and split this one once more and then create a cap out of that one, but this is a lot of time consuming effort. And what I often do is, if I have a pointed satin column, and I'll have to go a little bit further back yet, a few more steps. Okay. What I do when I have a sharp corner like this, I will go in the node mode and I will create an extra node here and an extra node there. Then what I will do is I will bring this one up, and I can have that one there, create another node, and I can drag this one over, and I can drag this one over. So the rails are crossing each other, what is no problem. And now I can go and have the tip completely sewing out continuously. So I'll go now to the params again, ink stitch params. And there you can see it is folding over itself. And if I change here the zigzag spacing, make that wider for a moment for the visibility of how it stitches. So there you can see the continuation of the satin rails, and you end up with a nicer stitch length. You don't get those really short stitches, so that can be controlled by moving the rails, creating extra nodes, and minor adjustments can easily be made, and even extra more nodes can be added. And in a case with this kind of overlap, sometimes it is nicer to work with nodes than to work with the rails, or to work with rungs, because to create rungs in here, it becomes really confusing on, because you cannot really create rungs in here in order to only cross each rail once. You can, a few of them you can put in there, but not too many, because you are gonna be crossing too many. As you can see, I can go here and I gotta go around, and now I can go and create. Oh, I have a stroke, but that stroke is really wide. So you can see I can create a rung to cross each rail, and the only way to do that is by going around. And the same here, I can create one over here if I need control of stitch directions. I can create rungs like this, so it will only intersect each rail once. Let's see. So then to create more rungs, I should have added these rungs in with it, but I'll do that in a second. So I'm holding down the shift key and I'm creating a few extra rungs here by holding down the shift key, and now I have to select everything for a moment and then path combine and do the darker green again. Okay, let's go and run this one through the simulator, and we go to the params again. And because I did use a combine, we will see that we get a running stitch along the path again. So we want to go to the satin column, and there you can see there were no issues with the rungs created, and you can see you get a nice clean stitch out here on the top. Okay, then the next part. So that is that one, and it can become complex and confusing. Also, we can create a satin column. We can create a satin column as big as your hoop, because after that then we just go and start changing the params on a satin column. And I don't know exactly how wide this one is. To a certain point it doesn't matter, but if you're ending up with really wide satin, more than the 12 millimeters, and most of the time I will go and change these settings when I am going over the 5-6 mil. And then we can add here the random phase for split stitches. We apply that. Now I always have to think here. Then we can enter here maximum stitch length, and there you can see now we are getting a similar look as a filled stitch. So all the green dots, that is a stitch point, and so these stitch points are being controlled by the maximum stitch length and the random jitter for split stitches. Depending on what value you enter that, then Inkstitch will create the stitch lengths within certain parameters. And if I don't add this one, now you will see we will be getting the standard split satin. So with a standard split satin, then if you enter a certain value, depending on the width of your satin, then if you enter, and depends how many columns you want to have that a kind of split up. So if that is if you enter a value just over half of your width, then you will go and get only one down the center, or as you can see in the corners there, the stitch length is longer, so you will get a different split. There you can get two splits. And let's see, if we go and make a 3.5, there you can see there still are a few stitches hiding there in the corner where it is a split. If we make it here 4, now you can see here it is all even, but we see here, we see the split stitches again. So that are all little things where you need to play with on, hey, what do you want to accomplish? And there's always an option on how you can accomplish what you want to accomplish. If you don't want to have split stitches here, then you may have to go and cut up your satins and rearrange some of the satin sections. So there's always options, there's always possibilities. So that is that one. And then what I did with this one, here is the ink stitch params, or I should almost go to the, I kept my original. Okay, just one moment here. I just have to select that one. I left my original over here. So now I have a multicolored satin. So if I go here to the params, and here you can see we can convert a single satin column. We can convert it into a multicolored satin, and there are options on changing the, with any satin column, we can change the edge on each side. In the center, we can change them. There's many options, and that is all in the params. We can use here a random seed that will change how they shows up on the edge. So it's got a certain pattern right here. If you want to change that pattern, we can go here and enter a different number, or we can just go and do a re-roll, and we will get a different pattern on the edge. Play with these numbers, don't be scared on the screen here. Nothing goes wrong here on the screen. So if you, it is so important that you take time and play with the software so that you get to understand. If there is a certain value and you don't know exactly what it does, enter a great value. For that matter here, I'm just punching in a number 6, and all of a sudden I will see, hey, something really weird happened here on the screen, and then try to figure out why did it do what it did. And we can learn a lot from just by playing with these numbers on what everything is doing. So, and with these satin columns, we can change the undersewing for each column. There's many things what can be changed on any satin column. So I'll go out of here, and the original was here. That was a line converted to a satin column, and in order to get the multicolored satin, all we need to do here is ink stitch, tooled satin, and then multicolor satin. And then we get here just a straight one because there is only one color is selected. So now we go and add more colors, and you can change the color, and once you're happy with the color selected there, that can be changed afterwards in the params. And there we have, just like that, we have a multicolored satin. Then we can, here you can enter an overflow right. There are a few aspects I am not happy with how it performs, but I will look into that also and probably pass it on to the developers, because here the overflow left, it would be nice if we could go and select each individual color and then apply to each individual color an overflow left and an overflow right. But I'm just going to show you here, and I'll press the enter. So the overflow left, here you can see that is the overflow, and the overflow on the right side, if I enter there at 20 and press the enter, or also what is possible and use a negative value. So there are many, it did not. Backspace. It used to be that we were able to enter negative values, but it is not allowing negative values here. So it may be equal distance colors, if that has to do with that. So no, it will not allow a negative value here. So in order to make then further advanced settings, then I would suggest it might be easier to go here just on leaving these at 0. Leave these at 0, and then just go and hit the apply, and I'll turn that one off. Hit apply, and then go into the multicolored satin column, and then go into the each individual satin and go to the extensions, Inkstage params. And here you can see, oh, they still must be okay. So now we can go add and change here all kinds of values. The random width decrease. I can go here now and change this, and even let's go even wider. There you can see now I changed the value to negative 50 there. So you really can see the difference. Here there is a 0. If I want to have the inside change also, I can add a value there. And so wherever you see in the params percentage each side, or distance millimeters each side, that means you can add more than one value in that field. And in most cases you can enter either a negative value or a positive value. So there is many options on how you can play with your satin columns. And there too again you can enter maximum stitch length. So there's all kinds of possibilities. Random jitter for split stitches you have here. It is just unbelievable how many options we have available with Inkstitch. So, but you just have to go and play with these numbers, because there is so much possible, so much possible. So I'll delete this. And this is a lengthy video, but I like to go here and show a few other little things yet. Also here, there was a design, and how do I have to create a Satin column? Well, on a fill object, we can do here, I did a trace bitmap path. Trace bitmap, like this is just an image I quickly downloaded, and then we apply the trace bitmap, and I wanted to convert the outer emblem into a Satin column. Well, how do we do that? Well, I did a trace bitmap. Then first we get trace bitmap, and I'll zoom in a little bit. And now I'm gonna go and clean up some nodes, holding down the Alt key, and I'm gonna go and trace around the nodes and delete them. And so hold down the Alt key again, and I just draw around all these nodes and delete them. So I cleaned up the emblem, and I ended up with this object. So how do we convert this into Satin? Well, there are options, because we know Inkstitch, we can convert a line into a Satin, we can convert a fill into a Satin, so there are always options available. And each person likes to do it a different way. We can, for that matter, we can go here, draw a line down the center. I'm not gonna work really accurate. I'm just gonna go and show an option. So there we can go, there is a stroke, and then I can go and set my stroke. I can go and make adjustments to my stroke, curve it, and then use the convert line to Satin. But I can stop here for a moment too, go to my path effects, and I can go to my rotate copies, and then I can enter how many copies I need. I would need 4 copies. So I press 4 and do the enter button, go to my node select tool, and I will go and drag my my node into place, and there you can see I have all 4 objects. They are created. Then go path, object to path, and then we go extension, Inkstitch, tool Satin, stroke to Satin, and now I'm gonna go and drag that out of the way. So there you can see I have all 4 of those objects created in a matter of a few seconds. And then for the center one, all I need to do is create a circle. So to create a circle from the center out, all you need to do is hold down the Shift and the Control, and there is my circle with only a stroke, no fill. So then go path, object to path, extension, Inkstitch, tool Satin, stroke to Satin, and then all you need to do is select your Satin. I could have had it created right away from the start, but I just wanted to show the different objects I had created with rotate copies. And there we can set that everything goes into a certain order. hold down the shift, make sure everything is in the right order, extension, ink stitch, edit, restack objects, order selected. Still everything is selected. Then I can go extension, ink stitch, tool stroke, jump stitch to stroke, and I hit my apply and then close, and there will be some connections what ink stitch has made, and then here I can go and add an extra node in order to place my connections better down the center. And here we see the same thing. Create an extra node in order to hide my connecting stitch properly. And there should be one. Oh no, that's it. Because this, the inner satin will start where that one is finishing. So now I can grab everything. Oh, I need to have the select button. Select everything, extension, ink stitch, visualize, simulator. And there we can see it is first doing the outer part, and then it will go over top of the with a center circle. So there, in a matter of a few minutes time, and we have an object like this converted into satin stitches. But there is also the option with the fill to satin, what can take sometimes more work than just creating a few lines, but that option is always there. Create a rung and then hold down the shift key and create some extra rungs, and then we have to create bridges here, so that can almost take more work than the other option. But in order to, now my strokes are too wide in order to get a good visual. So like here too, we want to have that one further extended, and same here, this one needs to be extended for the fill to satin. And I do have some other videos on it. I'm not gonna go and show all the details on the fill to satin here, but here we would have to create bridges, and then here there would have to be another bridge because of that black part of the object. So there's multiple bridges that need to be created in order to become successful with the fill to satin. And like I say, this would take a little more time than the previous one. So I didn't go and do everything, so it's gonna be probably a bit of a mess, but let's see what it's gonna show us. Now I have the rung selected, then select my fill, and we go extension, ink stitch, tools fill, no, tools satin, fill to satin, and probably should, since this was 4 millimeters, we should use a contour underlay, but that can also be changed afterwards in the params, and then hit the apply. And there you can see it has converted the one object, only the one object, and the reason for that was only because I did not finish the rest of it. But I have other videos in the group or on my YouTube channel on how you can convert fill to satin. Okay, I hope you have learned something again, and what kind of possibilities there are, and how to deal with rails and rungs. Okay, thanks for watching.